The night she slept at his house changed everything. Not because anything scandalous happened, and not because she planned it that way. It changed everything because the next morning, when the sun rose over the quiet suburban street and birds began their gentle morning chorus, a long line of black luxury cars rolled slowly to a stop outside the small, aging house. And standing beside the first car, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than the house itself, was her father, a man whose name was known across the world. A billionaire. A titan of industry. A man who had spent years searching for his daughter. But inside the modest home, the girl he had been searching for wasn't waking up in silk sheets or a marble mansion. She was waking up on a worn-out couch in a stranger's living room. Before we begin this story, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, The Kindness Chronicles, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion to change lives. Stories like this remind us how even the smallest acts of kindness can echo across destinies. Her name was Elena. At 21 years old, Elena carried a quiet sadness that most people never noticed. To the outside world, she looked like just another young woman trying to get by in a busy city. She worked late shifts at a small cafe near the bus station, walking home long after midnight when the streets were mostly empty and the neon signs flickered tiredly above quiet sidewalks. Her life had never been glamorous. Most people who saw her assumed she came from a struggling background, and they were partially right. Her clothes were simple. Her phone was several years old. She rented a tiny room in a crowded apartment building where the walls were so thin she could hear neighbors arguing through the night. What no one knew was that Elena had once lived in a world so different it almost felt like a dream. She had been born into unimaginable wealth. Her father, Victor Laurent, was one of the most powerful businessmen in the world. His companies stretched across continents. News outlets followed his investments. Financial magazines featured his face on glossy covers. People described him as brilliant, ruthless, and unstoppable. But behind the headlines was a broken family. When Elena was 10 years old, her mother died suddenly after a long illness. Her father, already consumed by business, retreated even deeper into his empire. Meetings replaced conversations. Boardrooms replaced bedtime stories. The mansion they lived in became unbearably quiet. Elena spent most of her childhood surrounded by nannies, tutors, and security guards who treated her with polite distance. Her father loved her in his own way, but he was always traveling, always negotiating, always chasing the next deal. Then one day, everything shattered. At 16, after a fierce argument with her father about her future, Elena ran away. She had felt invisible for years, like a decoration inside a palace. When he insisted she attend another elite boarding school across the ocean, she exploded with frustration. Words were said that neither of them truly meant. And that night, she packed a backpack and disappeared. Her father searched for months. Private investigators were hired. Security teams combed cities. Her face quietly circulated through networks of people who specialized in finding the missing. But Elena had changed her name. She had taken buses across states, staying in cheap motels, slowly building a new life that had nothing to do with the Laurent empire. Eventually, the search faded. And Elena became just another anonymous young woman living quietly in the city. For 5 years, she lived like that. Working small jobs. Renting cheap rooms. Learning what life was like without wealth or privilege. And strangely, despite the hardships, she felt more alive than ever before. But life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. One cold autumn evening, after finishing a late shift at the cafe, Elena stepped outside into the rain. The sky had opened suddenly, pouring water onto the empty streets. Her umbrella had broken earlier that week, and she wrapped her thin jacket tightly around herself as she hurried toward the bus stop. But the last bus had already left. Her phone battery was nearly dead. The streets were dark and unfamiliar. She began walking. Minutes turned into nearly an hour as rain soaked through her clothes. The cold crept into her bones. Her small apartment was still miles away. Then something unexpected happened. A car slowed beside her. For a moment she felt a surge of fear. A young woman alone at night knew better than to trust strangers. But the car didn't follow her aggressively. Instead, it rolled forward and parked near the curb. A man stepped out. He looked to be in his early 30s, wearing simple clothes and holding an umbrella. His face carried a calm kindness that immediately felt different from the suspicion she had grown used to in the city. He asked if she was okay. Elena hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. But the rain was relentless, and exhaustion had begun to cloud her judgment. The man introduced himself as Daniel. He explained that he lived just a few houses down and had seen her walking in the storm from his window. He offered a warm place to dry off and said she could call a ride or wait until the rain slowed. Everything in her life had taught her to be cautious. But something in his voice felt sincere. And that simple act of kindness changed everything. Daniel's house was small and slightly cluttered but filled with warmth. Bookshelves lined the walls. The smell of soup simmering on the stove filled the kitchen. He handed her a dry towel and a sweatshirt while she tried to stop shivering. There was no pressure. No awkwardness. Just quiet kindness. They talked for a while about simple things, work, the weather, the city. Elena didn't reveal much about her past, and Daniel didn't pry. He seemed like the kind of person who understood that everyone carried stories they weren't ready to tell. The rain outside only grew stronger. Eventually Daniel offered the couch for the night, explaining that it was safer than walking across the city in the storm. Elena hesitated. Then she accepted. She fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the long shift and the cold rain. The couch was old, but the blanket was warm. For the first time in months, she slept deeply. What she didn't know was that her past was about to find her again, because far across the city, inside a glass tower overlooking the skyline, a man stared at a computer screen in disbelief. Victor Laurent had never truly stopped searching for his daughter. For years, he had quietly kept investigators looking for any trace of her existence. Most leads went nowhere. But that night, a new piece of information appeared. A security camera from a nearby store had captured Elena's face as she walked through the rain. Facial recognition confirmed it within minutes. After 5 long years, Victor Laurent finally knew where his daughter was. And he moved immediately. By sunrise, his convoy of black cars had already arrived outside Daniel's quiet street. Inside the small house, Elena woke slowly as sunlight filtered through the curtains. For a few peaceful seconds, everything felt normal. Then she heard the sound of engines outside. Daniel looked through the window and froze. Luxury cars filled the street. Men in dark suits stood beside them. And at the front gate stood a man whose presence seemed to command the air itself. Victor Laurent had come for his daughter. Elena stepped outside, confused and overwhelmed. For a moment, father and daughter simply stared at each other across the small front yard. 5 years of distance. 5 years of regret. 5 years of unanswered questions. Victor Laurent, the billionaire feared by competitors and admired by markets, suddenly looked like nothing more than a father who had lost something precious. His voice trembled as he took a step forward. Elena felt a storm of emotions rise inside her chest, anger, sadness, love, confusion. But something else happened in that moment. Victor noticed the modest house. The worn steps. The simple life she had been living. And he realized something that no boardroom had ever taught him. The world's richest man had been unable to give his daughter the one thing she truly needed when she was younger, his time. As the morning sun climbed higher, something beautiful began to unfold. Not a dramatic reunion. Not a perfect ending. But the fragile beginning of healing. Victor thanked Daniel quietly for helping his daughter. And for the first time in years, Elena felt something inside her heart soften. Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what truly matters. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness, a warm couch on a rainy night, can reconnect lives that seemed forever broken. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to The Kindness Chronicles. Your support helps spread stories that remind the world kindness still exists.